Connections Radio presents.
Welcome to Vegas Hockey Hub here on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. I'm your host, Ian Kelly, and on this edition, we are going to be discussing something that I've actually been wanting to talk about for a while on this channel, and that is going to be discussing on when it comes to your Vegas Golden Knights, who was the worst free agent signing in Vegas Golden Knights history. More or less, who is that one player that throughout the 8 seasons that the Vegas Golden Knights are a unit and a franchise in the NHL, who is that one player the Vegas Golden Knights look back on and regret giving a contract to? We're going to be covering all of that here on Vegas Hockey Hub with your host, Ian Kelly. Into the breakdown and talking about who is the worst free agent signing in Vegas Golden Knights history, there is going to be 2 rules about the Vegas Golden Knights that I'm going to be doing on here just to kind of establish some ground rules with this episode. All right. I'm going to be putting in 2 disclaimers when it comes to this this discussion, conversation here on Vegas Hockey Hub regarding the worst free agent signing in Vegas Golden Knights history. So, disclaimer number 1, entry-level contracts are not going to be on this list, okay? Nikita Gusev is not going to be on this list. He was an entry-level deal who the Golden Knights signed and then traded to the New Jersey Devils. I'm not including him because he was an entry-level deal. He never even played for the Vegas Golden Knights. I'm not going to put him on that list. Kind of similar to a lot of the entry-level deals. If they're a bust, then I'm not going to put them on here. All right. If they sign an entry-level deal, that doesn't really count as a free agent signing. So that is my disclaimer there. So when it comes to a restricted free agent, when it comes to an entry-level contract, I am not putting them on here because I'm talking about a UFA. I'm talking about a player that signed with the Vegas Golden Knights as an unrestricted free agent. They signed a deal to come from Team A to Team B, and that Team B turned out to be your Vegas Golden Knights. That's disclaimer number 1. Entry-level deals, RFAs, do not count for the worst free agent signing in Vegas Golden Knights history. And then at number 2, the second and final disclaimer, and this is going to knock out one person from this list. And the number 2 disclaimer is that I am not going to include guys that were a sign and trade, all right? I am not going to include a player that was traded to the Vegas Golden Knights and then given an extension immediately after. And the reason why is that even though I know some people liked Max Pacioretty, I know some guys didn't like Max Pacioretty, the reality is Max Pacioretty was traded from Montreal to Vegas, and then he signed that deal with the Vegas Golden Knights organization. And I am putting that disclaimer on here because it's kind of cheating in a way. All right, it's kind of cheating because a contract extension implies that there was already a deal done with your previous team. It was already a contract that was going to be part of them to begin with. They get traded to Vegas, and then they had an extension done. So when it comes to Max Pacioretty, I am not going to be including him on there because in a way, he wasn't a free agent signing. He was a trade and sign. So that's the second disclaimer. I wanted to put that on here real quick. I want to establish the tone of this episode because there is a very important distinction between those 2 disclaimers. Because disclaimer number 1, it invalidates Nikita Gusev, which I know that a lot of people wanted to put him on a list of worst free agent signings because he never played for the team. So I'm taking him off the list because of that disclaimer number 1. He was a entry-level deal. And then disclaimer number 2 was Max Pacioretty, who, like I said, half the people liked him, half the people didn't like him, but he was a sign and trade. He was traded from Montreal to Vegas, and then he comes to Vegas and gets an extension, but that's an extension. I'm not putting him on there. So we're going to get into the worst free agent signing in Vegas Golden Knights history, but I do have an honorable mention that I'm going to be talking about before we get into the actual worst free agent signing. So we'll be talking about all of that here on PR Connections Radio and on Vegas Hockey Hub with your host, Ian Rick. Now, that honorable mention is because his contract is still on the books. He is still here to this day. And because of how new and how fresh that contract is, I'm putting it in the honorable mentions category because we do not know if it's going to improve, if it's going to turn around, if it's going to end up paying massive dividends for the Vegas Golden Knights. And when I'm talking about the honorable mention, of course, I am talking about Ivan Barbashev. And after his first year on that new contract that he got after being traded from the Vegas Golden Knights, he signed that deal in free agency to stay with the Vegas Golden Knights. Now, I want to remind you what I said about my disclaimer. I'm not including entry-level deals, and I'm not including sign-and trades. Well, Ivan Barbashev does not count as a sign-and-trade because he got traded from St. Louis to Vegas. He played for the entire Stanley Cup run, helped Vegas win a Stanley Cup, and then he signed that nice contract with the Vegas Golden Knights. First year was this past season. Year 2 is this current season, and it has been mixed. Depending on who you ask and depending on the analytical darlings that you want to talk about, either Ivan Barbashev is living up to that contract and he is paying off very well for the Vegas Golden Knights, or you think that he is not worth a first-line winger, that you think his 5-year contract is not what the Vegas Golden Knights should have paid him that much for. So it's kind of based on your opinion on how you see the game of hockey. Now, when it comes to Ivan Barbashev, I lean into more of the middle of that category. I think that Ivan Barbashev is a good deal for the Vegas Golden Knights. I see the upside. I see how he can be valuable. But do I think that Ivan Barbashev will stay a first-line winger throughout the entire run of his contract? No. With the amount of guys that we have underneath them on the second line and third line, I see him eventually being surpassed and eventually getting lower on the middle six for Vegas. And then at that point, if he's a middle six forward, that contract is going to start to not look as well as it does currently now. So that is the honorable mention for the worst free agent signing in Vegas Golden Knights history. And I'm putting the honorable mention because A, he's still active, year 2 of his contract, and B, because I personally think that it's not the worst free agent signing in Vegas Golden Knight history. They've had 1 or 2 really bad ones that I'm going to go over on this episode. But I just want to have him be the honorable mention because he's still active and because he's on the main roster right now. So we're going to be covering the worst free agent signing in Vegas Golden Knights history. And it's going to be a really fun episode to go over. And we're going to get into number 5 just right here on Vegas Hockey Hub on PR Connections Radio. We will be there and we'll talk about number 5 just in a second. So throughout the Vegas Golden Knights run, we have had a revolving door of backup goaltenders with the Vegas Golden Knights organization. We have seen in the 7, now 8 seasons the Vegas Golden Knights have been around, you have had the Malcolm Subans, the Oscar Dance. You've had, guys who have been backup goaltenders. You've even seen a guy who, could have been in the backup goaltender, then starting goaltender category that we will see later on in this list. And then we have had guys that due to injury problems, due to not staying healthy, they unfortunately belong on this list. And at number 5, I have goaltender Laurent Brisebois. So this was during the 2021-2022 season. Laurent Brisebois would sign a 2-year deal, a little over $4 million to come over to the Vegas Golden Knights organization. Now, what was interesting about Laurent Brisebois, and this is from hockeyreference.com, is that this is a guy who was with the Winnipeg Jets organization. He was the backup to Connor Hellebuck, and then he comes over to Vegas, supposed to be the backup to a goaltender that we're going to talk about on this list later on. But the issue with Laurent Brossoit is that he just could not stay healthy. This was an issue that happened throughout the 2 years. In the first year that Laurent Brossoit, he put up respectable numbers. And if you look at just his numbers, like if you pull up, Hockey DB, and you see the first year, I mean, he had 10 wins, 9 losses, 3 overtime losses, 89.5 save percentage for a backup. But the issue is that Laurent Brossoit, he wasn't a guy that you could see being an everyday guy with the Vegas Golden Knights. It also didn't help that after the season, he had to go get hip surgery during the offseason. And there was question about his availability. Would he be ready for the beginning of the next season? Well, when it came to Laurent Brossoit, the second year that he is going to be there, he ends up being with the Henderson Silver Knights. They put him down the AHL on assignment. They call him up, and then they start having some injury problems. He gets injured in a few games after getting called up. And the reality is, when it comes to Laurent Brossoit, this is a guy that ended up becoming a third string, fourth string at one point. You had Logan Thompson here. You had Aiden Hill. You had Jonathan Quick, who they acquired from the trade deadline. I'm talking about the year they won the Stanley Cup. I also have to talk about with Laurent Brossoit the fact that during the Stanley Cup playoffs, because of the injury concerns of Logan Thompson and the concerns about, who would it be, Quick, Hill, Brossoit, Laurent Brossoit would actually start games for your Vegas Golden Knights during the year that they won the Stanley Cup. And I always will give credit where credit is due. There's a reason why he's number 5 on here. Laurent Brossoit did a serviceable job with the Vegas Golden Knights during that playoff run. And he also was the starting goaltender when they beat his former team, and that was Connor Hellebuck and the Winnipeg Jets in round 1. But what happened at his end of his tenure with the Vegas Golden Knights? Well, unfortunately, Laurent Brossoit would get injured in round 2. Laurent Brossoit would injure himself against the Edmonton Oilers. He would skate off the ice. Aiden Hill would come in. And the Aiden Hill story that we know today was essentially created with the Vegas Golden Knights. So at number 5 being Laurent Brossoit, this isn't because of the fact that Laurent Brossoit is, a bad player. I'm not saying that he was an awful player for the Vegas Golden Knights, but the reason why he's number 5 is because when they signed this 2-year deal to be a backup goaltender, injuries, they piled up. They were kind of stockpiling after a while. And his lasting legacy, the last time you saw Laurent Brossoit be with Vegas was him skating off the ice injured against the Edmonton Oilers in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And for Laurent Brossoit, he went right back to Winnipeg to be the backup for Connor Hellebuck. And then I believe this offseason, he signed with the Chicago Blackhawks. I always wish everybody the best of luck throughout their career. But at number 5, Laurent Brossoit, he just couldn't stay healthy. That's just the reason why he's at number 5. It's lower on the list because of his contribution to the first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs, beating the Winnipeg Jets, and what he was doing in Edmonton before he got hurt. But he is at number 5 in terms of the worst free agent signings just because of his injury really becoming a concern in that final year of being with Vegas. So that is who number 5 is when we're talking about the worst free agent signing in Vegas Golden Knights history. Now, I said the honorable mention is Ivan Barbashev, who is on his current contract. And number 5 is Laurent Brossoit and his tenure with the Vegas Golden Knights and the injury-riddled thing that happened as the backup here in Vegas. And we're going to get to number 4 here on this episode in just 1 minute. Now, when you sign a big name in free agency, there are always risks that come with it, regardless of what team you are, what position it is, and the age of that person, there is always the risk and reward of this player. And for number 4, this is a guy who, when he first signed that 7-year deal to leave the St. Louis Blues, the team that he had been their captain, the guy who had been a leader in the locker room for them, he won a Stanley Cup with the St. Louis Blues, their first in franchise history. This was a massive deal for the Vegas Golden Knights. And when he signed this contract, there were so many people that were wondering how huge this would be for the Vegas Golden Knights. And at the beginning, it looked like the best deal of all time. It looked like, this was going to be a fantastic deal for the Vegas Golden Knights. But the later the contract has been, the opinion has started to sour just a little bit. And at number 4, I'm talking about the 7-year, $61 million deal the Vegas Golden Knights gave Alex Pietrangelo, which included a no-movement clause in his deal. And with Alex Pietrangelo, I'm not sitting here and saying that, the Vegas Golden Knights aren't thankful for what he did to help them win their first Stanley Cup in franchise history, his second Stanley Cup in his career. And I'm not going to take away the fact that Alex Pietrangelo, in this shortened 2020-2021 season and during the 22-23 season, he was one of the best players the Golden Knights had. But what I'm going to say about Alex Pietrangelo is that this past season, you've really started to see the wear and tear that has really taken a toll on Alex Pietrangelo. You have seen this season that really on the back end of the season, Alex Pietrangelo, he was missing games, he was hurt, he was injured, he was not on the ice, and even when he was on the ice, the age is really starting to take a factor now. He's not looking like the same defenseman he once was once the contract started. And really the main issue that you're going to have if you are the Vegas Golden Knights is that this is year 5 of this contract. You have 2 more years of this. And like I put on the screen, he has a no movement clause. You cannot trade him. You cannot get rid of him because you gave him that no movement clause. And this is a defenseman who's in his mid-30s who's going to continue to get older with every single age. So with Alex Pietrangelo, I'm not going to sit here and say that at the beginning, this wasn't a great contract for your Vegas Golden Knights. But what I'm alluding to is that the last 3 seasons that Alex Pietrangelo is going to be with the Vegas Golden Knights, expect his production to go down. Expect the amount of games played to go down. And if by the end of it, he is no longer a first defensive pairing despite getting $8.8 million on his annual average value, AAV, don't be shocked if that becomes a reality. In a way, this is the bigger version of what Alex Martinez's contract was when he had that 3-year deal, about $15 million. The Vegas Golden Knights gave Alex Martinez after they traded for him from the LA Kings. And the reason why I didn't put him on there is because when it came to Alex Martinez, he essentially had that contract. They gave him the amount of money that he was going to get. And then as the time went down, his contract is bad. But in terms of Alex Pietrangelo's deal and Alex Martinez's deal, I picked Pietrangelo over Martinez because of the fact that Pietrangelo's has more money and has more value on the table. So at number 4, when it comes to the worst free agent signing in Vegas Golden Knights history, because of the money and because of what's going to happen on the back end, once you get in the year 35, 36, 37, Alex Pietrangelo's no movement clause is going to start to become an anchor for the Vegas Golden Knights. And those injuries and those concerns are going to continue to pile on for the Vegas Golden Knights. So that is at number 4 for the worst free agent signing in Vegas Golden Knights history. And we're going to get into number 3 on this episode. And this is going to be a goaltender that started out with so much promise and started out with so much fanfare, but then by the end many people were not upset to see him go. And in fact, many people are kind of, forgetting about this guy as the years go on. So we're going to get to number 3 here on Vegas Hockey Hub, here on PR Connections Radio, and we'll do that in just half a minute. Now, getting to this spot with the worst free agent signing in Vegas Golden Knights history, and on one hand, I understand that this was a rock and a hard place, okay? I comprehend that there are going to be fans that are going to try to justify Robin Lehner because, when he came over from the Chicago Blackhawks at the 2020 NHL trade deadline, he helped during the COVID, during the bubble. He had those shutouts against the Vancouver Canucks. He played so much better than the goaltender they had during that time when they had the back end of the 2019-2020 season and during the 2020 Stanley Cup playoffs. So he earned that 5-year, $25 million contract extension. So I'm not talking about the playoff run. I'm not talking about the back end of 2019-2020. No, this at number 3 is referring to what Robin Lehner did once he got that 5-year deal. Because year 1 was the 2020-2021 shortened season, and he started at an all-time high, okay? Robin Lehner and Marc-Andre Fleury were arguably the best duo that year, winning the Jennings, by the way. When it came to Robin Lehner, the second time that he had done that in his career, this is one of the arguably 2020, 2021, the Vegas Golden Knights. They make the Western Conference Finals that year, and they lose to the Montreal Canadiens. This is a weird time period. We'll cover that more later. But with Robin Lehner, Marc-Andre Fleury, the playoffs during that year, the controversy surrounding Marc-Andre Fleury's agent, posting the photo of that sword, going through Marc-Andre Fleury, pretty much saying that DeBoer stabbed Marc-Andre Fleury in the back. Some people are going to say that was a real asshole move by the agent. Hey, we've already covered all this on this show. We've talked about it before. Let's focus on Robin Lehner. So that first year was the peak of the high that Robin Lehner would have on that 5-year deal. Because the second year was 21-22, and even though Robin Lehner, even though that he ended up being the starting goaltender because they had to ship out Marc-Andre Fleury because of the fiasco, he did not perform like an elite goaltender was supposed to do. That first year that they gave him all the reins, the Vegas Golden Knights missed the Stanley Cup playoffs for the first and only time so far as of this recording that the Vegas Golden Knights have missed the Stanley Cup playoffs. And then I also want to remind you, this is also the year that they brought in Laurent Brisebois to be his backup. Ironically, by the way, where Brisebois is on here, Lehner is on here. Man, that 2021-2022 season, man, that was fun to watch. And then the year 3 for Robin Lehner, 22-23, is where the problem started to arise, okay? Because Robin Lehner, this is a guy who at one point was even sent down to the AHL to have a rehab assignment with the Henderson Silver Knights, but Robin Lehner did not play a game for the Vegas Golden Knights in 2022, 2023. Robin Lehner did not play a game for the Vegas Golden Knights in 2023, 2024. That's right. This season, Robin Lehner not playing for the Vegas Golden Knights. So the reason why this contract is on here and the reason why it's so bad for the Vegas Golden Knights isn't how great the first year was. It isn't that he was a starting goaltender past that second year. It's the fact that the Vegas Golden Knights gave Robin Lehner $5 million to not play that third year. They gave him $5 million to not play that fourth year. And then the Vegas Golden Knights, fifth year, Robin Lehner, $5 million, not going to be playing for the Vegas Golden Knights. It was a bad contract in terms of his availability and him playing for the Vegas Golden Knights. Now, personally, I wish Robin Lehner the absolute best. I hope that whatever's going on with him, he absolutely recovers. He eventually, battles all those demons and all the things that are going on in his personal life. And he finds a way to kind of, turn it around and kind of fix what's going on. But with the Vegas Golden Knights tenure, He's at number 3 because it started out so promising. It started out so well in that first year of that contract extension, then for it to go so terribly wrong for the remainder of it. That's why he's at number 3. Now, at number 2 and at number 1, so number 2 is going to be a guy who signed kind of a big deal with the Vegas Golden Knights and did not have the stats that you would normally have for that contract. And then at number 1, for anybody who are diehard Vegas Golden Knights fans, you immediately know who it will be. But we're going to get to number 2 in just a quick second here on Vegas Hockey Hub. So after the first season, the Vegas Golden Knights were in franchise history. They make the Stanley Cup Finals. They lose to the Washington Capitals. The Vegas Golden Knights decided to make a splash in free agency and beef up their top 6. And they would go out and they would get a St. Louis Blue and Colorado Avalanche legend in Paul Stastny. He would get a 3-year deal, just a little under $20 million. So $6.5 million per year with the Vegas Golden Knights organization. So what ended up happening with Paul Stastny? Well, for $6.5 million, the Vegas Golden Knights only got 50 games and around a dozen goals in the first year that Paul Stastny is in Vegas. So he misses over 30 games in his first year, only gets about a dozen goals. Now, the one positive for Paul Stastny, though, on that first year is that he did score 42 points in those 50 games. So a little under a point per game. That is serviceable. That's good for the Vegas Golden Knights. But for $6.5 million, around a dozen goals is not great for the Vegas Golden Knights. And I also have to mention, this was a guy who started out, he was on a line with Marchessault, on a line with Carlson. Carlson and Marchessault are doing amazing during that season, and Paul Stastny not on the same level of production as what they would be. And then you move over to Stanley Cup playoffs where they lose in the first round of San Jose. He's on a line with Mark Stone. He's on a line with Max Pacioretty. And while Pacioretty and Stone are putting up solid numbers, Paul Stastny would be behind them in that category when it came to their performance in the playoffs. But okay, that's year 1. Year 2 would be a very interesting time for Paul Stastny because not only did he play all 71 games because of it was being cut short due to COVID, but this is a guy in Paul Stastny that did have more goals. Yes, he did have more goals, but he had less points in more games than he did the year before. And Paul Stastny at one point was delegated down to the 3rd line at $6.5 million. Okay? There was a time where they were putting him on the same line as Cody Glass and Alex Tuch, 2 young guys with the Vegas Golden Knights. And then that season with the Western Conference Finals, Vegas Golden Knights, he did have a little under a half a point per game with the Vegas Golden Knights. But after those 2 years of underwhelming production, 30 goals for 2 years on $6.5 million contract, the Vegas Golden Knights would literally send Paul Stastny to Winnipeg, and they would trade him away and wouldn't even play that 3rd and final year. So, yeah, he's a runner-up just because of how much money they gave him. But number 1, I mean, come on. 2 years, $9 million, $4.5 million per year for just 3 games for KHL legend Vadim Shiparov. So for Vadim Shiparov, the guy who's a KHL legend, one of the greatest players in KHL history, 3 games, $9 million. I'm making this here a minute because anybody who's a Vegas Golden Knights fan, you knew it was going to be Shiparov. Anyone who's a diehard hockey fan, you knew it was going to be Shiparov. And even if you're a casual fan, 3 games at $9 million, that is an interesting worst free agent signing in your franchise history. So until next time, I'm your host, Ian Rakelli, and this is Vegas Hockey Hub. Go Knights!
PR Connections Radio thanks you for watching this podcast. Check out more episodes of this show and our others at prconnectionsradio.com.